Hello and welcome to Collective Basketball Agreements Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Manganiello. Really excited today to be recapping free agency for the WNBA's runner-up from the 2024 season, the Minnesota Lynx, one of the most storied, celebrated franchises in the history of the WNBA. Franchise that Maya Moore, my personal GOAT in terms of women's basketball, made her name professionally with Minnesota. Obviously, it was a great UConn Husky as well. Minnesota Lynx, really have in the WNBA's young history have pulled out in front as one of the great franchises in the league. Target Center is a great venue. And this past year, in some ways, I think they snuck up on teams, snuck up on fans of the league. They were 30-10. First in the Western Conference, going over the fundamentals from last year, a 104.6 offensive rating, fifth in the WNBA. But I think in a lot of ways they achieved well above that. And we saw some of the best offensive performances in playoff history from this team and from their, arguably the most well-rounded starting lineup in the game, although the New York Liberty got the final word on that. Defensive rating, 96.5, second in the WNBA, just behind the Connecticut Sun. Great defensive team led by Defensive Player of the Year, Napheesa Collier, and a net rating of 8.1, third in the WNBA. As we look at their financial fundamentals after this activity from the winter, 4 guaranteed contracts, 10 unguaranteed contracts, so they're going to have to do a little finagling at the bottom of their roster through training camp. But, we essentially knew, coming into this off season that they were going to be running it back and doing their best to reload what was a great team. And there wasn't a reason to change the starting lineup. They only have $186,000 in cap space left. And in terms of the draft, a late first-round pick, number 11, and then they also have the 15th, the 24th, and the 37th pick. So some draft capital to work with this offseason as well. I wanted to take some time here in the beginning, especially because Minnesota is a team that, didn't have a ton on their to-do list this offseason, although there was, there has been some changeover. But I wanted to go through the WNBA Finals from this past year, watched highlights and tape from this past Finals, all 5 games, and just kind of talk at a high level about what I love most about this team, and then use that to sort of round out, ultimately the moves on the margins that they made this offseason and kind of forecasting what this season might look like. I mean, where you have to start is that the Lynx, again, arguably boasted the WNBA's top starting lineup in 2024, and that led them all the way to the final round. They were able to beat the Connecticut Sun in a 5-game series, which, as we now know, was the end of an era for the Connecticut Sun, which is really something. I think going into that series, if I put my thinking cap back on and try to think about, what some of the predictions were, in some ways, Minnesota came in and outdid what Connecticut does best as an elite defensive team with well-rounded size and skill players at every position. And then up against the Liberty, they gave the Liberty everything they could handle and more. But let's go through it. Game 1, the New York Liberty get off to a 14-5 edge and even a 27-12 edge. Leonie Febish and Sabrina Ionescu drilling threes, the Liberty turning defense into offense, transition opportunities. They're at the Barclays Center. Shout out to the Barclays Center. Fans are going nuts. The lights are bright, shooting flames. They pull no punches over there in terms of the event planning and the spectacle. And as a basketball fan, the Liberty are so hungry. They're trying to get back. They get back to the finals after losing in 2023. They have all the motivation in the world to finally win their first franchise title. They're up 27-12, and I think it would have been fair to be like, hey, like maybe the stage is a little too bright for Minnesota. New York's going to come out, dominate their home games, and it's a 5-game series. If they win the first 2 games at home, and they have 3 chances to close out the series, I think the Liberty would be, the heavy favorite there in the driver's seat. But kudos to Minnesota. They hang around. Continuing to go through my notes here, 36-21 edge for the Liberty. A defensive rebound for Vandersloot, kicks it out to a JJ layup. Touchdown Liberty. Ryan Ruocco on the call. And this is a game the Liberty really, they dominated it in many ways. 23-11 edge in second chance points. 20-5 edge in offensive rebounds. The Liberty have a 13-2 run in the fourth quarter. The Liberty have a 13-9 edge in three-pointers made. And yet, Minnesota was able to force overtime and ultimately win in overtime. They had a few fortunate moments. I know Breanna Stewart is going to be kicking herself for her performance down the stretch of that game, although, not kicking herself too much because, ultimately able to get the ring by game 5. But to Minnesota's credit, they were getting easier shots more often. They ended up shooting 50.7% from the field. Liberty were shooting just 37.8% from the field. And in a game would go to overtime, a 95-93 final score, Minnesota's able to win. I mean, that's a huge moment. That is a huge moment. Go to game 2, and Minnesota is playing the Liberty tough all the way through. Liberty playing with a lot of gusto, a lot of drive, a lot of motivation. Shout out to Betnijah Laney-Hamilton, one of my favorite players in the league. This was her game. I think it's fair to say it was the Betnijah Laney game. Goes 5 of 6 with 13 points in the first half, hitting spot-up threes, powerful drives into the second half. The Liberty never trail in this game. And then early in the fourth, Laney catches in the right corner, dribbles to the nail with the left hand, fadeaway jumper, gives the Liberty a 63-55 edge. And then another huge three-pointer by Laney in the left corner gives them a 71-66 edge. Laney goes on to hit 4 out of 6 threes, 20 points on the night. Sabrina Ionescu was plus 20 in her 36 minutes. And Liberty hit nearly half of their threes, 11 out of 24. And yet again, in a game where the Liberty were getting a ton of advantages, their best players were making highlights, I'm watching the tape, and Courtney Williams was punishing switches all over the place. Dribble penetration, playmaking. Collier is hitting step backs, is getting into the post, into the mid-range, creating opportunities for herself. And so Minnesota was still playing well. I think the Liberty just outplayed them for that one game. And so they come to the Target Center for games 3 and 4. And I think Minnesota had to be feeling pretty good. Kayla McBride with some early bombs in game 3, a nifty runner. Bridget Carlton, a reverse layup, triple threat 3, a lefty dribble pull-up. Minnesota's up to a 28-13 lead. The game continues. McBride, so many answer buckets down the stretch of this game. She's got a quick trigger, the size-up dribble into a smooth step-back 3. And yet, the Liberty, they have so much star power. At least last year, the one team that I think could beat Minnesota, because Minnesota's so steady, they're so sturdy. And game 3 was really fascinating because Sabrina, Stewie, and JJ, 3 of the biggest stars in the sport, so much skill. They had to really go to that upper echelon level, reach into their bag and pull out a whole bunch of tricks in the half court to create great shots, great scores. They finally take a lead late. And what we're going to remember from game 3, of course, is that step back. Or not step back. It was an isolation play. She had McBride on an island, goes to her left and pulls up from, probably 28 feet, 29 feet. Biggest shot in the history of the Liberty was the call by Ryan Ruocco. I think Teresa Witherspoon might have something to say about that, but no doubt that the Liberty winning game 3, final score 80-77. If Sabb doesn't hit that shot, if this game goes to overtime, who knows? And so Minnesota's right there in game 3. different bounce of the ball here or there. Maybe they have a 2-1 lead instead they're down 1-2, and yet they come back in game 4. And in my opinion, I think game 4 of the 2024 WNBA Finals was maybe the highest level of shot making, over and around contests, physical finishes, dribble penetration, getting all the way to the lane, reverse finishes. Some of the best offensive basketball we've ever seen in the WNBA, like an A+. And as the game is coming down to the wire, Jonquel Jones, 6'6", I mean, one of the great physical specimens in the history of the W. Multiple huge fourth quarter blocks. Liberty have a 72-70 edge. But then a 3-point barrage from Carleton and McBride. Now Minnesota's up 80-75. Liberty, they fight back. They get to 80-80 on a JJ, just a beastly and one. And then that game, such a great game. McBride had 19 points, 4 assists. Such a great game. Comes down to, one of those plays. I mean, basketball is a sport where a referee blowing the whistle here or there, it's a part of the game. I think ultimately, I think it was a fair call, but a foul on a box out that leads to Carleton going to the free throw line, hits 2. Now they win 82-80. And so that sets up game 5, all the drama, everything on the line. And right off the bat, Napheesa Collier scoring via bounce pass, first 2 buckets of the game, getting to the rim. Then Lynx go up 6-0. Alana Smith, 6'4", really, really skilled big. She's able to just go up and get an offensive rebound. Sabrina was the only thing in her way, and she scores. Then the Lynx go up 15-10 on an Alana Smith spot-up 3 in semi-transition. Great job for her to locate behind the line. And I think it was Courtney Williams that slid the pass over to her on the right corner, or right wing. Then Minnesota goes up 22-12 on a McBride handoff. Collier goes backdoor, and Collier was really good at that all series. I mean, Stewie is a great defensive player. It's definitely part of her Hall of Fame resume. Great length, wingspan, affecting plays, deflections. But in the series, going back and watching the tape, I mean, Stewie was getting turned around and beat backdoor by heads-up plays by players like Collier. And then McBride hits a step-back 3, 22-12 lead for Minnesota. But the game really shifted when the Liberty were able to get Niara Sabali in and find opportunities. It's funny, so much star power in this matchup, and the pivotal game, the decisive game, game 5, I think is going to be known in a lot of ways as the Niara Sabali game, because she comes in, in the fourth quarter, back-to-back scores. Sabrina lobs a pass over the top in transition. Niara seals her defender, scores. Then there's a pick and roll. She dives hard, gets behind the defense. Now the Liberty have a 40-38 lead. Then a little bit later, Sabali with a runner, hits a runner, Liberty up 47-44. But now the game's going back and forth. I mean, it's for all the marbles. Minnesota take a lead on a McBride drive, 50-49. And then Leone Phoebish, we're going to talk a lot about her on the Liberty episode. Pump fake and drive, gets to the rim 52-51. A little bit later, Stewie sets a screen. Sab relocates deep behind the arc, right wing, and Collier just can't quite get out to her in time. Sabrina hits a 3. That's her first made shot of the game. She was 1 of 14. So think about that. Minnesota has such a great defense. They're able to control Sabrina so that she misses her first 13 shots in the closeout game. Incredible. With the Liberty, you're up 56-52. But Collier gets them back in a position where they have a chance to win, ties the game, and then gets the lead on these plays in the half court where she just twists and turns and uses expert footwork to find an opportunity, times a pump fake just right. Sabrina trying to make a block. Nope. And we really saw Napheesa Collier become one of those all-time greats in this series, in this postseason. I don't know that the basketball world was clear on that before this season. But Collier, Defensive Player of the Year, an offensive package and an overall skill set that is just exquisite. forces overtime. And then I think Minnesota just kind of ran out of gas a little bit. Sabali is able to make a play that's going to go down in the Pantheon, coming out and denying, what in retrospect was a pretty, lazy high post entry pass. Sabali picks it off and takes it all the way to the house, gives the Liberty a 65-60 edge. And then I think the more underrated play was coming back down. Minnesota's in the half court. Collier is able to make a move. She's going toward the rim, and she's trying to time a pump fake similar to a basket that forced overtime. But as she's going back up for the true finish, Sabali comes from behind with a swat, and that about does it. And so Minnesota, plays really well. This is a really well-played series by them. But they lose to a team. I think what I'm prepared to say is I don't think that Minnesota is necessarily the worst team just because they lost that series. I think that the Liberty have to get a lot of credit for the perseverance of, yes, they lose that home game in game 1. They win 3 out of the last 4 games of the series. Every game was close other than game 2. And game 2 was competitive. Liberty just are able to pull away at the end. I think Minnesota had the best team in the WNBA last year. I think they had the most well-rounded team. No disrespect to Connecticut and those players. I think Minnesota had the best defense in the league. And I think Napheesa Collier is able to go toe-to-toe with the Breanna Stewarts and the Jonquel Jones of the league. I think the Liberty being such a great shooting team ultimately got them over the top in this series. Alternatively, I think that Minnesota isn't that far away from being able to match them shot for shot. And Kayla McBride, just to talk about her for a second, one of my favorite players to watch in basketball, lightning fast release. This past year, career highs in three-pointers made in a three-point percentage. And, she is a real great offensive player. And what a wonderful wing to have, with this overall personnel. Just going through the starting lineup, you got Alana Smith at 6'4", was an incredible signing for $150,000, had a net rating of 15 this past year. She's really coming into her own, a former number 8 overall pick in the 2019 draft. Bridget Carlson, her and McBride have a great chemistry. I love when role players within a system, they learn each other's language, they highlight each other, they lift each other up, they find each other in the best spots. I love when McBride works the baseline and then finds Carlton on the opposite side corner, weak side corner for open shots. That sequence presents itself pretty often for Minnesota. Carlton, by the way, 62% true shooting percentage and a 117 offensive rating this past year. When she's on the floor spacing out, it makes it that much easier for this front court of Smith, McBride, and Collier to do their thing. And then I talked about this, anecdotally in my Atlanta Dream episode, but Courtney Williams. I've been watching Courtney Williams for 4 years now, since I really started getting into the WNBA. And it's incredible that Minnesota even had a chance to have her on the team. As a reminder, Courtney Williams, a $180,000 salary for this upcoming year. That's not even 12% of the salary cap. This is a player where, there are only a few defenders who can consistently stay in front of her, and she can get anybody's go at any time. She's just yoking people off the dribble. But I think here in Minnesota, she's been able to prove that she's a true point guard. Or if she's always going to be more of a combo guard because of her offensive skill set, you can't hold that against her in terms of she has the playmaking chops and she knows how to work within a lineup with other players on the floor, other talented. She's not just a chucker or anything like that. And I gotta applaud her for a career season, a career high 37% assist percentage. Like, she proved, hey, I can be the lead guard for a team like this. But if we're going to talk about Minnesota, we have to spend some time talking about Napheesa Collier. I think that she should probably be the favorite to win MVP this year. It'd be her first award. She won the Depot last year and clearly has elevated her game another level. We saw it in the playoffs. I want to go back and just shout out, by the way. Well, okay. So one, I want to shout out the Dunker Spot podcast. Nekias Duncan, incredible basketball prognosticator. He was comparing Collier to Juju Watkins, which is pretty cool. I mean, both players are about 6'1", 6'2". They have kind of overlapping guard and forward skills. There's a defensive versatility that allows them to do a bunch of different things and work in lineups with a whole bunch of different types of personnel. But at the end of the day, if you have Collier and you need a bucket, find a way to get her the ball, especially, around the nail for those mid-range spot-up opportunities. There was like a Dirk Nowitzki type to her game, watching the tape again from the Liberty series. And, Juju is going to be more of a perimeter star, more of a lead ball initiator. But I really like that comparison. These are two athletes with great size for non-centers, and they're not afraid to use that size on both ends of the floor. I did want to go back to the 2019 draft. And I mentioned before, Alana Smith was the number 8 pick. So Minnesota was able to build this, finalist team around women, different ages, different draft positions, different, backgrounds. From that 2019 draft, not only does Minnesota come into Alana Smith, but they drafted Collier with the number 6 pick in the 2019 draft. Just to go back, the number 1 overall pick that year was Jackie Young to the Aces. Jackie Young, one of the best players in the world, incredible talent, has certainly earned that selection. She's won championships. Number 2 overall pick, New York Liberty. AD, Durr, it hasn't quite worked out for them. Number 3 pick, Tierra McCowan, Indiana Fever. McCowan obviously has transitioned to a different team since then. Number 4 pick, Katie Lou Samuelson to the Chicago Sky. Lou's bounced around to a bunch of teams. Now she's going to be in Seattle for this upcoming season. Didn't quite work out in Indiana, which was her previous stop. And both sides were amicably able to negotiate a buyout. Number 5 pick, Arike Ogunbale for the Dallas Wings. One of the best scorers in the league. Great offensive player. We'll see, ultimately in terms of legacy, what's the best Arike team going to be? What are the best results for her in Dallas going to be? How long will she be in Dallas? I mean, obviously, in 2026, there's a whole lot of variables. It's fascinating to look back at the top of that draft, knowing what we know now, which is that the Aces made the right pick at 1. If the Liberty could go back and draft Napheesa Collier, I mean that's one of those things. And look, like there's a couple players that more than a couple players they could have taken it to that would have been an upgrade over the selection they made. But the idea that there were 5 teams that could have had Collier and Minnesota was able to draft her, develop her through the pandemic, through the, a few of the more recent seasons than the last year, to just have everything come into place the way it did. Minnesota's earned it. I mean, Minnesota's one of the best franchises in the W, and their track record developing star talent speaks for itself. Now, what I'll say next is one of my big questions, and this will be more of like a rapid fire sort of miscellaneous to end this episode, because again, Minnesota, they didn't have to do too much. They didn't have to do too much to change the team. They did lose a couple players. But my first question, what is the future of former number 2 overall pick, Diamond Miller? Diamond only played in 21 games this past year. The stats are not great. Now, for Diamond's career, so again, the number 2 pick in the 2023 draft, she had started 32 games in 2023. Averaged 12 points a game. About 3 rebounds, about 2 assists. Shooting splits aren't great, but she was a rookie. Got to the free throw line a little bit. And then this past year, the team jumps up a whole level. There isn't a lot of playing time for Diamond. Misses time. What's the future of Diamond Miller? I thought that there was a chance that she might get traded this offseason. And Minnesota has the number 11 pick. It'll be interesting to me where we already know what their starting lineup looks like. They move some pieces around in terms of what their bench is going to look like. Who do they take at number 11? And is it someone who can play right away, or is it a project? If it's the latter, is this player going to get a chance to see the floor their first year or two in the league? We'll have to find out. And then similarly for Diamond Miller, is she more valuable as a trade asset than someone who is kind of stuck in that 9th or 10th man role? We saw Napheesa Collier-Juju, guard for the Lynx, get a small raise up to $135,000. Her per 36 minute production looks pretty great. 11.5 points a game, about 4 rebounds, about 5 assists, about 2 steals per 36. So, she's good in her role, comes in, makes an impact, can do a bunch of things. Love to see Heidemann back. I thought it was interesting. Speaking of the 2023 draft, the number 7 pick, Grace Berger, she's now going to be in Minnesota. In her 2 seasons with the Indiana Fever, she's made 18 out of 39 threes. That's a 46% clip. Let's see what she can do. Let's see if she can find a way to break into this rotation and make some shots. Just kind of looking through. I number 8 pick from the 2024 draft, Alissa Pili. Love her size. 6'2", 235. Powerful, big, very intriguing player. Would love to see her get some more time. And we just might because, one of the best player to leave Minnesota from a year ago, Myisha Hines-Allen, she's going to now be on the Dallas Wings. I think Pili could absolutely jump into that role and provide a lot of impact. Now, the other big that Minnesota was able to add this offseason, and my apologies, I might butcher the name here, French big, Myriam Badian. I'll look more into her name, but from the clips on social that I saw, she's a versatile 6'3" big. She's got experience in the Olympics, EuroLeague, the Turkish League. Shout out to reporter Alfred Caretti. Love following him, and he was sharing. She had a game this past winter, 21 points, 13 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, a block. She was productive overseas. Would love to see what she could do if she can crack the rotation for Minnesota. So all in all, I'm really excited. I'm really excited for this group. We're going to find out exactly what they do in the draft and with some of these young talents. And look, the answer might be, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Bring your starting lineup back. Find opportunities to get 23-year-old Diamond Miller, 25-year-old Grace Berger, 23-year-old Alissa Pili, and then some of these other, training camp invitees on the floor, spare your veterans here and there throughout the season, and then make another big playoff push. Obviously, 2026, who knows? But really, really excited for this upcoming year for Minnesota as a basketball fan. Would not be shocked if they get back to the finals. Would not be shocked if they do more. But with that, I'll wrap up the Minnesota Lynx recap here. Stay tuned for more WNBA content to come as we recap the 2025 free agency period.